Okay, to be respectful of your time, I would like to start on time. It's one of the biggest pet peeves I have whenever I come to conferences is people starting late or going long. So it is now 1 o'clock. You are back in the upgrade room of the Commonwealth. Myself, Rick Claus, Senior Technical Evangelist of Microsoft, Canadian, and my good friend, Macca, otherwise known as Andrew McMurray, from down under.
Good to see you all back.
And there was actually a rather funny comment on the Twitter streams earlier, because obviously we are both Twitter people, @Rickster CDN, @Macca, MSOZ. Z, sorry for those of you that are American. He made a statement or a comment earlier about chalk, that's just chalk and cheese. And someone says, what the heck does chalk and cheese mean? So can
you don't use chalk and cheese over here? Don't you?
It's not Chuck E. Cheese, the pizza joint.
Don't come the raw prawn with me, man. Chalk and cheese is an Australian
colloquialism
for when something is completely different from something else. So they're as alike as chalk and cheese. Now, I don't know how many of you have a penchant for eating chalk, but it's not very nice compared to a bit of cheese. And if I do say to you, don't come the raw prawn with me, even I don't know what that means, but it sounds pretty good.
No idea what you just said. Again, if there are any language barriers, please feel free to use the microphone to let us know. We'll try our best to be able to translate for you.
And trust me, I am changing my accent as much as I can today. If I just start slipping into the normal way I speak, we may as well all go home now.
That's normally tonight at the Superdome party where alcoholic beverages are involved that starts to happen.
Excellent.
Anyway, let's get started. This is the networking, infrastructure, and management section, part of the upgrading, the official upgrading series that has made it into TechEd today. We are in the same room all day long. I'm glad that the numbers have thinned out. I was actually expecting that there would be crickets in the seats today because on Fridays they always put up Mark Rusinovich as the star speaker of stuff that's going on. So, what? Thank God it's Thursday because the chairs will be empty. So yes, thank you. It's a 4-day session. So anyway, it's tough going up Mark. He's an awesome speaker. But the good thing, as I remind everybody at the very beginning, all of Mark's sessions are recorded. You can view them on demand later. You can't miss this stuff in here. It's in person. So we're going to be talking about what is your infrastructure. And again, for those of you that have been here so far, you've seen this slide probably 3 times now. This will be the 3rd time you're going to see it right now. But what is the part of your IT infrastructure that you are the most concerned with upgrading? This was my complete and total informal poll where I simply asked people on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and other people to also share the love and share the news to say what chunks of your infrastructure are you the most concerned about. The biggest one being workloads, which unfortunately we're not dealing with because of lack of time, but we're dealing with all the foundational stuff to lay down a good straight floorboard for you to be able to build your house upon or do renovations on. And so the 23 responses back on number C is application servers. Second was Active Directory. We dealt with that before lunch. You can catch that on the replay if you're interested. Then number 16 is E, which is your virtualization hosts. There actually was a phenomenal session on this one yesterday that you managed to catch, Macca.
Oh, yeah.
There was, Ben, the PC guy.
It was Ben Armstrong, Jose Barreto, and...
Jose was there. Jose Barreto.
Yep, and there was another speaker there as well representing the clustering
team as well.
Yeah, really good session around upgrading your private cloud effectively to Windows Server 2012 R2.
And they did a whole section on just the hypervisor layer of stuff, to be able to get it up, and working. So go catch that one on replay. Again, we don't really have that much time for cluster. We'll kind of touch on it just as an information piece a little bit later on, but that's it. Surprisingly enough, D came in tied at 13 votes that came back for networking infrastructure, DHCP, DNS, and the rest of the sort of stuff. I was a little bit surprised for you for that. And so because you're all here, I'm assuming this is rather important to you. So if you know what networking is all about, I want to ask you this question. What is the most important networking service in your environment? And just, shout it out. We'll repeat it. Active Directory, DNS. DHCP. Interesting. Anybody? Bueller? Somebody else? So, wins. Oh,
jeez.
Wait, let me get that out of my back here.
Does anyone want Does anyone want to yell out like net buoy or anything? We're still running that here. When I went for one of my first jobs, this gives you an idea of how little.
There's no longer a supported networking protocol if it ever was a protocol in the first place.
When I went for one of my first jobs, the guy sitting opposite me interviewing me for the job said, "Oh, you need a lot of knowledge about net buoy." I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's a broadcast protocol. And he said, "What's a broadcast protocol?" It's like, I don't want to work here.
Nice. So, interestingly enough, almost everybody gravitated immediately towards Active Directory. It's not really a networking service. It's an identity service, authentication service. It's not really the networking side of things. Some people said DNS. To me, they are meshed. You have to have a solid understanding of both to be able to do stuff. So obviously DNS is in there as well. However, we're not going to be covering migration of DNS because we covered that in the last section when we talked about Active Directory migration. Because our philosophy and my philosophy has been you keep your DNS servers with your Active Directory servers, and that's where generally everything all lives and happy. You use the multi-master replication of integrated Active Directory zones to make sure it replicates correctly, and it's all good. If you are in an environment that likes to prefer to use bind 8.1, whatever it was, to be able to use your own dynamic DNS and keep it separate from Active Directory, that all still works, but I'm not going to work through how you have to migrate a bind DNS system, but it is there as well. I only heard one person say DHCP, which is nice. And obviously no one actually went through and talked about IP addressing or IPv6 or any other networking services just yet, or else I didn't hear you because you were shouted down by other people.
We don't need to worry about that, right? Because we're all fully migrated to IPv6 already, aren't
Everyone's all done, right?
Yeah, that was easy.
Well, the main part with Active Directory, the main part with networking services in general is that it's one of those systems that you just expect is going to be there all the time. It's always going to be there. I boot up my machine. I remember this in the old trading courses, the whole concept of the conversation that goes back and forth between the client and the server, and then the conversation that happens with the client and the network before it can even talk to the server for going back and forth for troubleshooting. You know, DHCP ACK, DHCP NAC, can I renew my address? Is it all good? Can I keep it? Yes, I can have it. Okay, I'll go off and talk to DNS, and off it goes. We expect dial tone, but like any service, like these lovely payphones that are just expected to be there at all times and are waiting for things to basically just continue to work right along, I was happy. You're right, there it is. I was happy to find this one, literally walking back from the convention center, and I actually found a payphone that was still out and available in the wild. And I'm like, I should go get a quarter and try to make a call. And I can't because there's no receiver, yet alone the fact that the numbers are all mashed up and stuck. There's beer poured on top of it. It smells like you don't want to know what it smells like. But anyway.
So clearly it's an Australian payphone now.
But the idea is basically if it's a neglected service because it hasn't been maintained or looked at in a long period of time, there's all this lovely little stuff that's in there that you might want to clean out and make sure it's okay and still tip-top notch working, and it's all there. Because as soon as that dial tone isn't there, what happens to your phone? Go with me, go with this analogy. What happens to your phone? It rings because you use a cell phone as opposed to a payphone. But basically, if the network isn't working, nothing gets done at all. If network has issues, if it's latency that's going on, not that we have any problems with latency of the network at all, at TechEd with 10,000 people in hotels that have crappy internet connection. Not that I'm bitter or anything like that.
No, of course not.
So anyway, your network needs to be in tip-top shape. And this is where potentially if you are not the network admin, the network IT gal, the network IT guy that's looking after this sort of stuff, you may want to do it. This does not mean I'm talking about going off and replacing all of your networking infrastructure with multi-fabric switching solutions that have 10 gig Ethernet down to the desktop and every single desktop and all your servers, and you got InfiniBand going, you got RDMA enabled NICs. We're not talking about any of that. It's just the fundamentals of stuff. So what we did when we sat down and took a look at the networking services that are available in Server 2012 during the design process and the planning process for that, we basically looked at what the needs are from what we anticipated from talking with you and listening with you and working with you. Or basically, you're looking for a simplification. Simple is good. Remember my design philosophy for Active Directory? Keep it simple, right? Guaranteed high levels of service and service level agreements. Being able to put a SLA, an SLA, on service quality for different types of services and for different things that you provide for networking services for your users. Extremely easy to manage, better control, more extensibility to be able to have automation, all that sort of stuff. continuous availability and also resilient network infrastructure is also a desirable thing to have. But the challenges that you're currently faced with against all these kind of things is trying to keep all that all working without worrying about the underlying hardware failures that exist. Managing complex networking environments tends to be a little bit complicated. Third-party solutions, high-tech solutions like spreadsheets and pieces of paper and post-it notes, as well as very expensive third-party solutions for address management, as an example. Maximizing use in multi-tenant doesn't apply to everybody, but it's there. Newer hardware technologies, better performance, all sort of stuff is there. So we hopefully address those, and that's one of the reasons why you're inside this room and not listening to someone else talk about malware threats and searching for stuff like that. We have in Server 2012 networking infrastructure basically the idea of, in the box, you get resiliency of IP addressing. Simple terms, that DHCP server, which is probably one of the most critical environments that you happen to have, and hopefully you haven't offloaded it to some little small consumer-grade router to serve off of addresses to your users or something like that, or you're just running some small little not very well-maintained daemon running on some server someplace you don't know how to manage. You get resiliency of IP addressing with DHCP with 2012 because we no longer require you to set up a DHCP cluster.
Yes.
Yay, it's a clap right there. Yes, yes. If you haven't done this yet, it is phenomenally simple to do. We'll show you how to install it, how to migrate to it, how to work with it. And you now finally will have the ability to set up 2 different levels of architecture for how you want to do your DHCP addressing. You know you're in a room with fellow networking enthusiasts when they get excited about DHCP ACKs and NACs and where they go. Getting out, before we even get down there, I already talked about this one in the first session if you missed it, and that was the ability to finally have in-box NIC teaming to solve the biggest issue with networking that's out there, equipment failure. Second, close by, human error of unplugging something, plugging something in, or misconfiguring a port. The fact that you now have NIC teaming in box where you no longer have to worry about finger pointing for who's responsible for what problem because you're using a vendor's driver to do NIC teaming. Do all your NIC teaming in box with the inbox drivers, with the vendor's drivers, just not the vendor software to be able to go off and do the NIC teaming piece. And then the address management side of things. This is, again, one of those things where I jokingly referred to in the Active Directory session, the fact that you could magically walk over and grab the red book that has every single design consideration for why you designed Active Directory in that fashion, and every single change that's ever been implemented down to the level of group policies that have ever been implemented inside Active Directory, and then use the same thing for your IP addressing scheme as well. IP addresses, they just start to consume. They start to work using private addressing inside your environment, perhaps, in which case you say, oh, another subnet? Sure, no problem, I can do that. Boom, done. Migrating switches from place to place, moving things back and around. How do you keep up to date with where those addresses are in use? When I need to create a new network-connected printer, what address range should I use inside that scope for that new networking printer to stay consistent? How do you do that now? How do you control it? And there's the cricket sound right there. Spreadsheets, pieces of paper, post-it notes. And then finally, WSUS. Obviously, that we're going to be lumping WSUS into this environment right now because it is something that should also be taking place. Patching, right? We all patch every second Tuesday of every month religiously, and we're not behind in our patches, right? Sunday religiously. At least you wait for the week to go through. Nice. Very true. We also, it's not covered in here though, but I'll see on the patching side of things, one of the other drivers on 2012, more so with clustering side of things, is cluster-aware updating, or CAU, or CAU. The ability to go through and basically have a WSUS and have automated patching on your 64-node Hyper-V cluster where it will go off, do an assessment across the cluster, and actually take the workloads from node number 1, the least busy node, let's say, move them off, do the patching, do the verification, shut it down, bring it back up again, and then balance the stuff back out across it again, all in box. That's available also with 2012 as well. So we're going to talk about how to migrate WSUS and how to get it to that next level if we're there. So how do I get there? How do you do this migration? Well, first of all, I'm going to warn you, we're not going to be talking about the larger discussion that we vaguely had earlier on, which was talking about changing over and integrating dual stack IPv4 and IPv6 stuff at this point. That's a very large chunk of meat to have to bite off to be able to chew to work this out. And so obviously you're already well underway with your IPv6 planning and how you're going to implement that inside your work environments and make it available so that every single fridge and chair is able to be accessible on the internet.
Actually, we've got a really good plan template in Australia that we use for going to IPv4 and IPv6, and it goes something like this. La 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 la. And it works really well.
Yeah. So we're not going to be talking about IPv6 in this time around, other than to say that obviously it is absolutely something you have to look at. There are definitely resources that are there. We do have services that are available to go off and to manage these. Our DHCP servers are able to serve out DHCP IPv6 addresses. It's able to do name resolution. It's able to do translation between IPv4 and IPv6 when we're talking about dynamic access. It's not dynamic access. It's direct access. Thank you, whoever said that over there. And things like that. So we're ready to go. We've been dual homed and dual stacked for a while, but we're not going to cover it in this particular session. So we're talking about IPv4 stuff in this point in case, and then the services that go on top of that. So we found a map as we're driving around about how to get there. So I thought I'd take a picture of it and share it with you. So you start off and then you turn left at the T intersection, but make sure you take the second exit, which is a dead end, but then actually you don't go around because you missed it, and then you know what, just give up. We'll do it. No, in all honesty, that joke just fell completely flat.
Might be doing that one again.
After lunch. We'll try to see
Might be doing that one in
out.
Madrid, clearly.
Just laugh for our benefit, would you please? Everyone, 2, 3.
Thank you.
Thank you for the recording.
Sorry.
Perfect.
Any applause, gratefully accepted.
So
we're here all week.
So first of all, we're going to be talking about inbox tools. We actually made available with 2008 R2 and 2012 and 2012 R2 these things that were PowerShell commandlets called the server migration tools. And they're available by simply going off and installing them. You're actually going to demonstrate that, right? So I should stop talking about it?
Yep.
Okay. So where do you find all the details and resources about migration as a whole for everything that is going to be inside your Microsoft environment? Well, normally what I would do is I would go off and I would search with my favorite search engine. So let me show you how to do that. You go to Bing, you type it in, and you say Windows Server 2012 migration, and you press search, and then it comes up, and there it is down there. So at least we're still on the first search page. This will basically take you to the resources specific to the TechNet library for the 2012 migration tools and all of the major workloads on which these 4 sessions are based on for more referenceable information in case you're interested. So how to migrate Active Directory, how to migrate these different services, how to do WSUS, which is kind of tough, but we'll tell you how to do it. It's all there from this one individual little link. And no, I'm not going to do that from that other competitor search engine to see where we rank on that one there. So those Windows Server migration tools, once you install them, it literally is simply a matter of adding the feature and you got it. You have a couple of different PowerShell commandlets. I'll just briefly list them here. The idea is that you do a get SMIG server feature, and then you get to find out what is available to migrate. You've got an export and an import, which is used for primarily taking the settings off of one guy, server, and bringing them onto, with the import command, the other guy. You can do that for local groups. You can do that for computer names. You can do that for IP addresses. You can do that for services. That's basically how it works with a bunch of commandlet scripts. The best part is because it is PowerShell, it is documented. It also is able to do the what if command to say what's going to happen if I actually do this. It is going to have /examples for different types of examples. And once again, this is a continuation of another session I did a couple of years ago, which was Get Out of Dodge, which talked about migrating a bunch of these different types of workloads at TechEd, migrate them up to 2008 R2. The same principles apply, and they're all still there. The migration process basically comes down like this. You have to figure out what you're going to be migrating first. That's the question mark. You do your discovery by going to the TechNet portal, which you found with that search. You're then going to go through and read the migration guidance. I all made you take a pledge with Active Directory. I'm not going to make you do it again if you're already here. Basically promising me that you are going to do your due diligence beyond what we're talking about in this brief 60 minutes to talk to you to figure out what the impact's going to be for your migration. You then go in and basically you have your source and your destination. You only use the temp storage guy if you're doing a data migration of files. Basically, you're going to be doing stuff between the source and destination server for how this works. And you'll be getting those source files. I'm going to leave that for Mr. Macca to talk about here. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty quick, simple little demo of about 5-6 minutes, maybe a little bit more. So with that, Mr. Macca.
Thank you.
Off you go, buddy.
All right, so what you can see here is my soon-to-be DHCP server on Windows Server 2012, if you bothered to look at the title at the top there. At the moment, what I've got is a 2003 server running DHCP. So the object of the exercise is we're going to get the migration tools installed on the Windows Server 2012 side of things. We'll then create a further set of migration tools to be run on the Windows Server 2003 side, get them across to the 2003 server, and then register them on the 2003 server as well. Fairly easy to do. Now you'll see that I'm in Server Manager here. I'm going to go to my Manage menu, and again, you've seen me do this type of stuff before, add roles and features. Now this is a feature that we're adding here so we can ignore the roles section.
And I just want to make one thing perfectly clear in case you missed this from other things. He's using Server Manager right now. He could be doing all of this work from a Windows client at his desk.
Absolutely.
Does not need to be at the console, does not need to be terminal serviced in. He can do all of this from a client system, all the demos that we're doing with Server Manager.
I certainly can. So I'm going to choose a role-based or feature-based installation, and I'm going to skip straight over the roles page once I've got to it. You can see here I can now choose which server I'm going to use.
So is this your source or destination? Did I miss that because I wasn't paying attention?
This is my destination server at the moment, running Server 2012.
Thank you. I'll be quiet.
That's all right. And you can see now we're in the features section, and if we just move in there, you can see Windows Server Migration Tools is one of the features. So we simply select that, choose Next, install. It doesn't take too long. And what this does is it installs and registers in place the migration tools on this particular system. And what we then want to do is, as I said before, we want to create a package of further migration tools, further applets that can then be moved across to the appropriate places that we're going to run them. So we can create packages for Windows Server 2003, Windows Server 2008, and Windows Server 2008 R2.
So this eliminates the issue of having a 32-bit system you cannot plop a disk into or a USB stick into, do an in-place upgrade. You have to get the data off, keep it clean to the new guy. That's what the migration tools do.
Absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll go to my marvellous Start menu here, which we're all used to by now and have stopped complaining about. And we're going to open up the migration tools.
You do realize this is recorded.
And I'll just change this so we can see it a little bit easier. Right. And now what I'm going to do is simply change directory to the Server Migration Tools area where this has been installed.
Now, just to draw a point to this, he's actually in the specific PowerShell window for the server tools, so he doesn't have to bother registering the different command lines.
Absolutely right. So all the snap-ins are now registered. Okay, from here what I'll do is I'll run a smig deploy command and tell it that I want to create a package for the appropriate architecture type, in this case being 64-bit, for the appropriate OS, in this case being Windows Server 03. What I will then do is I will save those down to the root of my C drive, probably not the best in the world, migration tools being the folder. Now, it's as simple as that. If we now go and look...
I have a question for you, though.
Yeah, sure.
You're doing a 64-bit on 2003 architecture? That's correct?
Correct.
So we have a 64-bit 2003 box in there in our environment?
Correct.
Oh. If it was a 32-bit, you just change your architecture?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely right.
Just checking.
No problem. Alrighty, if we go into our C drive now, you'll see that we've created a folder called Server Migration Tools _ WS03 _ AMD64. And if we have a look at those, you can see all of the appropriate things that we need there. Now, I'm literally just going to copy that across to my source server, which is currently running 2003 DHCP. So I'll put in my server name here. Don't want to get that wrong because it looks stupid. And I'll literally copy it. Again, I'll just put it into the root of C for now.
So this obviously can be done on a 2008 R2 64-bit server as well, to be able to do the same type of migration.
Now back over at the 2003 box, I'm just going to have to re-authenticate here. What we can see is if we go to our directory that we've copied across, it's just simply a matter of running smig deploy, or smig deplot if you don't know how to type, like so. And that then goes and registers the migration tools with the system. So it's effectively an installation routine, and you now see that it spawns a PowerShell window ready for me to start running whatever applets I need to. If I just go into my administrative tools here, you'll also see that it's placed a program group, Windows Server Migration Tools, into the administrative tools so I can quickly and easily get back to that PowerShell prompt with the snap-ins enabled. And that's literally all there is to it.
Right. Now again, if you were a 32-bit server 2003 R2 install, like most are, you are able to use the exact same tools, exact same process. The difference would be the architecture switch at the beginning when you do that first export. That's
Correct.
It. Good for slides?
Good for slides.
Sweet. Okay. I've got a very complex slide here we're going to be talking about for DHCP server migration, so please just bear with me as I build through this individual slide. Here is your 2003, 2008, 2008 R2 DHCP server, which is your source. It has multiple scopes, multiple reservations, multiple addresses. It's currently active. It's serving out addresses left, right, and center. You want to do a migration, in which case you have to have a 2012 box that has DHCP already installed on it, and then you're going to be using those migration tools to move it over. And with that, I'm going to bring back Mac to go ahead and do it. That's how complex it was. Gotcha.
Yeah, pretty tough, eh? All right, so here I am over here at the...
Hang on. There you go.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. All right, so here I am over at my 2003 server. So what I'm just going to quickly show you is how DHCP currently looks on this particular machine. So if I go over to DHCP, unfortunately I don't have a zoom that works on this machine, so you'll just have to bear with me. You'll see that I have a scope which is currently running 10.0.0.0. If I open that up, you'll see that there's a reservation in there for a machine called mail server, just so we've got some data in there that we can work with. Now, best practices would tell me that before I go any further with this, I should back up the DHCP server's database, just in case something goes wrong.
We all back everything up. We all take time. We make sure it all works, and we check to make sure that it works as well.
Absolutely, and I can get back to that a little bit later. So,
you've done the backup already?
I've done the backup already. It was that quick, believe it or not.
It's a stunningly fast system.
That's right. Okay, now what I want to do is a number of things. Firstly, we're going to incur a little bit of downtime here. So what we're going to do is stop the DHCP server. What we're then going to do is export all of the information about the DHCP server to a migration file, which we'll then copy across to the destination server running Server 2012 and essentially take the identity of that DHCP server. As part of this process, not only are we going to put across the DHCP information onto the new server, but we're also going to take the IP information of the 2003 box, migrate it across to 2012, and 2012 will effectively take the identity of the old DHCP server as well.
Now, why is that important, that we're taking the IP addresses of the DHCP server over as well? Anyone? Correct. Basically, the answer was it knows where the addresses came from. So DHCP process is broadcast-based, but after you've done the broadcast for discovery as a client, you hear from the server, the DHCP server, here's a directed response back to you. Do you want this? Sorry, it's broadcast back, sorry. And then you select it. Yeah, I'll take it with a directed response. And then the server comes back and says, OK, you got it. So basically, you check back in again at the, I forget, the 6/8, is it, or 1/8, or the half-life of it, whatever. You basically keep on checking back periodically with directed requests to that server, can I renew? If you change the IP address on the destination server without doing that migration, you'd be checking back and not talking to anybody. Eventually, it would expire, and you'd ask for it. That probably would still work, but we just want to cover all of our bases.
Okay. So I'm going to stop the service now, like so. Right, the service stops, and now what I'm going to do is run a export command. So as you can see here, what we're doing is an export SMIG server setting. We're taking the feature ID being DHCP, so the tool knows exactly what it needs to export about that machine. We're also grabbing the IP configuration information and putting that also into our migration file, which will be encrypted. And we're then saving that down to a migration folder on the C drive with a subfolder of DHCP, and we're taking a verbose output of that so that we can see what we're doing. Now, as part of the export process, we will encrypt the data in the file. And the reason we do this, of course, is because it can be somewhat sensitive. And when we try to import that, we will need to provide a password. So the password prompt you're seeing now is essentially asking me for the password that will be used for encrypting that file and will be needed to decrypt the file. So I'll just put in a password here, and off it goes. Okay, we're done. So that was fairly easy. Now, if you just want to very quickly have a look at where that's currently residing and what it looks like when you go into it, we can go into migration here, go into DHCP, and literally you have one file. I apologise for the lack of zooming capability here. One file, .meg, and it is encrypted. Now, the IP information about this machine is in that file as well. So we've got a couple more things we need to do. When we bring the IP information across, what we probably want to do is also bring across the MAC address information of the original server. So if there's any applications out there that are still expecting to see this particular IP address of this particular MAC address, we want to bring that into the new server as well and essentially merge it across. Now, in order to do that, what we'll want to do is actually run an IP config against this machine. We want to take that output straight into a text file, so we have a copy of this server's MAC address, which we will then use on the other server, the destination server, to essentially mask over its current one. So what I'll do is I'll just move myself, by putting myself into the correct spot, I'll move myself to migration, DHCP, and I'll run an IP config /all and pipe that out to IP settings.txt. And now we have a copy of the IP settings. So if we, again, just have a quick look at what that looks like. For some stupid reason, I went and shut down the window, which was fairly stupid of me, wasn't it, Rick?
I didn't want to say anything.
Right, now we have the IP settings. So this physical address is going to be important to us because we're essentially going to need to merge that into the destination.
A little caveat as well, a little part you need to mention is the fact that you're doing this from a system that is a single-homed, single network card system, and you're going to a similar single-home, single network card system as well. You have to make sure when you're doing the migration that you're matching the number of NICs, MAC addresses, segments, to the number of NICs on the destination. Otherwise, it doesn't know how to match the scopes into that other side. So you can't go from 1 to 3. You can't go from 3 to 1. It has to be the same on both sides.
And now we use, finally, the netsh command to delete the information about the previous DHCP server. And last but not least...
The information, what was that? The authorization?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, they obviously have to be authorized in
So I do beg your pardon. And then what we're going to do is finally take all of that information and copy it across to our new 2012 DHCP server. And we're going to utilise that in just a moment. And did I actually type that correctly? No, I didn't. Let me just do that again. Yep. 2012 DHCP1 is the correct... This resolution's killing me. My eyes aren't great. Oh, man. DHCP1.
Double backslash.
Oops, sorry about that. And we should be in just a moment.
You could also obviously sneaker this across, copy it across.
Or alternatively, I might have forgotten to open up the appropriate firewall ports there, so what we might do instead is go the other way. And we'll grab that and stick that onto our local C drive as well. So, okay, so we've got that. Now, last thing we need to do...
Pay no attention to the man behind the velvet curtain.
That's right.
Yes.
Now, the last thing we need to do is simply shut this machine down. We're done.
We're obviously assuming that there are no other roles that need to be migrated off of this box. He's not also doing DNS. He's not also doing domain controller responsibilities. This is just a single-purpose box of being DHCP.
Right. Now, back on DHCP1. First thing we need to do is actually install DHCP, because right now, DHCP isn't even installed on this machine. Obviously, you would have done this beforehand, because right now, you've got no DHCP infrastructure at this point.
Well, hopefully, it has a level of resiliency as long as the systems have been up before, because the addresses will continue to live for a period of time, right?
So we'll go ahead.
Yeah.
You've seen this wizard a million times, so we particularly don't need to see it again. One thing I do want to show you, though, is that whole authorization process, the thing that's very easy to forget to do, is built into this installation routine. So when we finish, it will provide me with a link that says, hey, come along and authorize this server for me, please. So here we go. All finishing off.
Just wish we had that i7000 again.
Yeah, the Core i7000 would have been useful here.
While we're waiting, any questions so far? Is there anything mystifying or confusing for people as of yet that you wanted to ask? Because this is an interactive session. Yes, sir. The question was, will I change the IP address of the server? The answer is yes. Part of the migration wizard that he chose to export was the role as well as the IP address settings. So the IP address settings will now be assumed by this new box once we do the import process. Hasn't changed yet, but it will be. The question is, you don't want this to be a domain controller as well, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. Pardon me? Okay, the question was basically, if there were other services running on this destination box that are bound to the old card, is it going to basically rebind to the new address? And the answer is yes, because With the dynamic wave, we basically shut it's the same thing as basically you're going in to uninitialize and reinitialize the card. It's going to basically rebind the services that are there. So more than likely the services will rebind themselves, unless, of course, there's third party. But you all promised you're going to be planning, you're going to test this inside your lab environment, make sure that it all works, to cover yourself before we go ahead and do it. So the question is, you're changing the address on this box, the target destination box? The answer is yes, it is being changed. The old one will become available for use by other people. Last question before we go back to the demo at the back there with the funny hat. I can say that because I have a funny hat too.
If you were to have, you said that you can't go from a lower level of NICs to a higher level of NICs, but you want to enable that NIC teaming for redundancy. Would you actually have to remove the NICs or disable them prior to doing this migration and then reinstall and enable them?
So the question was basically, we know that we need to have the same number of NICs on both sides to be able to do this migration. But I told you prior to this whole demonstration, what about enabling NIC teaming? If you create the NIC team ahead of time, you have basically what's known as your team NIC, or TNIC. The team NIC is going to be the one that you're going to be binding this change over to, so it appears as if it's one. Once you basically make a team, the other three could disappear from the binding order and visibility, and only that one, which is the team NIC, actually shows up. So you could do this ahead of time, no problem. You could do it after the fact, but basically you can only do a one-to-one matching. Okay, back to the demo.
All right, so now that we've installed DHCP, what we're going to do is very quickly go ahead and authorise this utilising my current credentials. As you can see here, I don't need to go and change those. So I'll hit the commit button, and that's done. Now what I need to do is I need to take the old information and migrate that across to this new server. So I already have a PowerShell window open here, as you can see, and I'm pretty sure I pasted in what I needed, and I didn't. So I'll just very quickly grab this information here.
I like how you put it inside a text file so you can copy and paste and forget the ability of fat fingering that. Absolutely,
yes. It's probably a very good idea. So as you can see here, what we're doing now is we're running an import SMIG server setting. We're grabbing the feature ID DHCP. We're doing an IP config. We're also grabbing the IP addressing information and we're moving that across to this server. What we're also doing is we're looking for the source physical address of what was originally on the 2003 server, and we're masking that onto our target address, which is the address of the NIC that we intend to answer on. So we'll effectively be putting a soft MAC address in here. What we're going to do then is we're going to go to the DHCP directory on the C drive inside our migration directory, and we're going to utilise the MIG file that we find in there in order to do this. Then we'll run a verbose to give us information as to exactly what happened and whether or not it was successful. So right now, if we were to very quickly just bring up a command prompt and just run an IP config, just so you can see this, this new DHCP server currently has an IP address of 10.10.10.24.
Yeah.
All right, so keep an eye on that. Now, you can see we're being prompted for the password. We'll put that across. It's going to collect the data, and it's going to apply it to this particular machine. And it's going to apply it to
this particular
machine.
It's going to apply it
to this
particular machine. It will apply it. The question was, will it apply to this machine? The answer is yes. It will apply it to this particular machine.
This one.
This machine. Oh, the joy we're going to have when people replay this again at some point. They're going to say, what are they doing? Say,
all right, there you go.
We have so much fun here at TechEd.
All righty, so this particular machine...
This one?
This one is now 10.0.10.14. So we've got all of that information across. You can clap if you like. No? Okay, fair enough. And now what we'll do is we'll bring open our DHCP administrative tool, like so. We'll add the current server. And don't you love the way it just opens up like that? And I am really bad at getting these. Oh, dude. There we go. All right,
we've created these demos at a much smaller resolution, and we were expecting issues.
Start the service, because of course it's currently in a stop state.
Yeah.
And once it starts, we have ourselves everything we expected to see coming across. So here is our scope exactly as it was in the previous server. Here's our mail server reservation. We're now providing IP. Well, it looks like we're providing IP, but are we providing IP? So we probably want to prove that we actually are providing IP by going to our client box here, logging into it, and just doing a DHCP, an IP config release renew, just to prove that we're still getting addressing.
Bless you.
Hoping that he remembered to re-enable the virtual NIC.
Yes.
Good, he did. There you go. We're still going.
Woo.
We just migrated DHCP.
I cannot tell you how much effort that would have saved me in my previous role when I had to do the migration the old-fashioned way with backup and restore. Less than a 20% or 30% chance it would work. You'd be missing a whole bunch of stuff on different boxes. Oh, it is so beautiful to now see it. But now it's running on 2012 hardware, 2012 software, all set and all good and all goodness. Are we good to go?
Good to go.
Good to go. So in the new world of DHCP with 2012, the biggest thing, as we mentioned earlier on, with networking stack that's improved from a services perspective on the DHCP world, is basically the ability to have failover, both in an active environment without having to worry about clustering. Two separate machines that are running to be able to provide addresses and active leases, and not have to worry about making those lovely super scopes, not worrying about having to worry of having 80% on one guy, 20% on the other, and then having to worry if they grab it and do exclusions and sort of stuff. And now it's just so easy to do. And the big thing is that the clustering is no longer required to do this. Architecturally, based on how you implement this, you could have it so that you have 4 physical sites, 5 physical networks, 4 physical networks that are out there, let's say, and then you could have DHCP, I'm forgetting the term. I'm blanking after lunch. The listening, the proxy guy that simply does the forwarding.
IP helper.
Yeah, IP helper, thank you. Pointing towards a single box that could actually be running with 4 scopes inside of it. And it would be able to provide backup consistency to any one of the other guys in case they happen to fail. Or you could simply even do it from a load balancing perspective, because we all know that IP addresses are becoming more and more and more and more demand of use. As the number of devices that we all carry increases at our workplace, we're getting IP address starvation going on. So we can actually have load sharing with 2 boxes on the same subnet with the same address ranges set up to basically do a load sharing between the 2 of them, and they basically check back and forth. We're doing this all with industry standard protocols. We're not doing this magic sauce of RPC connectivity back and forth. Like, this is something that's very, very cool for how we're getting it done. Now, Macca, is it difficult to set up?
Oh, it's almost impossible.
Okay, well, we better show them.
All right.
That was not the answer I was expecting. But let's go ahead and try, see if you can simplify it for them.
Okay.
And do this guy off.
This is incredibly easy, and if you've ever been in the position where you've had to set up a full-blown DHCP failover cluster, you will start to cry when you see this, because it is extremely simple.
There are tissues at the end of each of your rows.
Okay, so what we're interested in doing here now is we're interested in taking this particular scope and setting up a failover relationship with another DHCP server. And when we set this up, we can choose to either go with a load balancing type scenario or a hot standby type scenario. One of the things with this demo is we tend to attempt to show you both types in action. The problem is that there's a little bit of a lead time. We don't have a lot of time with load balancing in order for us to see it flip over to the other machine when you're changing the load balancing algorithm. So I'll pretty much concentrate on the hot standby one. But anyway, what we do is we simply right-click our scope that we're interested in configuring a failover relationship for and choose Configure Failover. Now, first thing it will do is it will give me information about which scopes are available for us to fail over. I'll choose Next. And now it simply asks us for the name of the partner server that we want to add in. So I'll just put in 2012 dhcp2.corp.contoso.com. Click Next. And it says, right, no problem. First of all, I'm going to give you a relationship name. And what it actually does is it just creates a base name that has the 2 servers' names inside it with the type of failover that it is. We then have our maximum client lead time. And our maximum client lead time is additional time provided to a DHCP client after the expiration of a DHCP lease. And the maximum client lead time is transferred from the primary server to the secondary server in the relationship so that we know how long we can extend after the maximum amount of time a lease is given before we really do need to give out that lease again. You'll see here we have a mode. which is either load balancing or hot standby. And in a load balancing mode, what we do is we specify a weighting of the local server versus the partner server when it comes to giving out IP addresses. So we could say if we wanted to, you know what, this primary server in this particular part of my organisation has many more potential clients that could report to it than the other server, which might potentially be in a completely separate site. So we can skew the weighting of who will give out IP addresses to whom here. We also have the ability to set up a shared secret here to establish this, which is what we're going to do now. So I'll change my maximum client lead time from 1 hour to 1 minute, because we are in a demo environment. And I'll give it a shared secret.
Don't do this in production.
Like so. Click next, click finish. We're done. That was it. Who's set up a DHCP high availability cluster before? Hands up. Anyone? Anyone? Right. Was that easier? If you say no, I have a word for you. And I'm not allowed to repeat it. I am Australian. So we'll just finish that. Now, do you believe me? Do you really believe it happened? Of course you don't. So what we're going to do is go across to our other DHCP server that we set up before on Windows Server 2012 and just see what happened. So over here on our 2012 DHCP2 server, we'll just refresh that. You'll see that the scopes appeared. We're there. And what we can also do here is take the properties of IPv4. If we take the properties of that, we can view the current failover relationships that are actually happening with this particular machine. So what we'll do now is we'll just very quickly go back to our client machine. Sorry for all the changing around. There are a fair few machines in this demo environment. Yeah. And we're going to do a release again. Now, we expect this to work, right? We now have 2 servers that are potentially giving me addresses. So we'll do that. And then when we get the IP address back, we'll just run an ipconfig/all to see exactly which server actually gave me this. Don't worry, it'll work. Right, now do an ipconfig/all. Just quick show of hands. Who comes to Microsoft demos purely for the enjoyment of seeing a demo fail?
No.
Hands up. There's always a few out there. That's all you want to happen. All right, now we can see here currently that the DHCP server giving out the address is 10.0.10.14, which we know for a fact to be 2012 DHCP1, because that was the one we migrated across from 2003. So if we want to prove that the other one can step in and actually do some work here, what we might do is just go ahead and change our failover relationship. So if I now go to IPv4, go to failover here and choose edit, I can get back into the settings for the failover relationship. And what I want to do is change this from a load balancing mode to a hot standby mode. So I'll change this to hot standby like so. Click OK. Click OK. So now we're in hot standby. In other words, my first DHCP server will give out the IP addresses. We'll continue to give out the IP addresses while the second DHCP server remains motionless until such time as it realises that the first DHCP server has gone down and will then start giving out IP addresses for the end machine. Alrighty, so what I'm going to do now is stop the DHCP service running on this machine.
I would have just turned it off, just more dramatic, but I guess that works.
I could have done that. I'll do that next time. We'll do a release. We'll do a renew. This is the bit you've all been waiting for. Well, we've still got an IP address. And this time, 10.25 gave it to us.
Yay!
Right.
Got a question out front here? The weighting setting, is it by per server, per scope?
Per scope.
It's per scope.
Yep. Now, what we could do, if you want, I can bring the other one back up and see it fail back again as the primary server, but
no.
No, he doesn't want to see it.
Nope.
Well, what do you reckon? Now, how easy was that in comparison to setting up a full high availability cluster? Done. Inbox, took me a couple of minutes, we're off.
Question in the back? A split scope. They're asking basically, could this also support a split scope if you wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's scope is a scope is a scope as far as this guy's concerned.
That's right.
The question is this the same thing as a split scope in 2008 R2 or 2008 R2? The answer is no, it's not.
No.
This actually does the load balancing between them. They can both answer off. They replicate between themselves with industry standard protocols, which addresses are in use. They can also go through, if he didn't actually stop the service and increase the wait time, it would have waited and waited until the other server basically couldn't give it back its address. It's much more robust and complex to it than that. Okay, next up on DHCP, hang on your questions if you could, because the next demo coming up is about 20 minutes long, and we have 25 minutes left to be able to cover the content in here.
I'll be quick, I promise.
Okay. How do you track your IP addresses right now? Spreadsheets.
Yoo-hoo!
Third-party solution.
Work experience kit, anyone?
Work experience person or co-op person with spreadsheets and pieces of paper. Basically, there's a variety of options that you have too. You could be using spreadsheets. You could even just be using whatever DHCP scope options are in there, and that's all you document if you wanted to. But basically, the pros and cons are spreadsheets. There's a no CapEx investment. It's very simple to work for small networks at first. It's very labor intensive. It only performs address management. Next level up is you actually go with an in-house tool developed if you happen to have some development experience in there, have a website, some level of automation that can go in if you wanted to, high degree customization, but you got maintenance, and then what happens when the developer of that particular app gets hit by a bus or leaves, in which case you're now stuck with that old way of doing things. Or you could go with a third-party solution that someone mentioned over there. Those typically end up having a good level of automation, a good level of feature set, interoperability as well, but they're not exactly cheap. They are an additional cost that you have to have, additional thing you now have to maintain, and other things along like that. We have Inbox available with 2012 and continue to have it in 2012 R2, in case you're wondering. That's one of the hands-on labs you could actually do downstairs, is the IPAM demonstration.
Yeah, you can, and I really recommend checking it out.
The 2012 IPAM implementation that we have right now basically is Inbox solution that gives you the ability to have a seamlessly integrated solution with Microsoft DHCPs and DNS offerings. And it can also import information from other DHCP addressing solutions that you happen to have because of PowerShell integration. So basically, we do something called address-based management, or ASM. We have the ability to organize, assign, monitor, and manage static and dynamic IPv4 and IPv6 addresses. We have the ability to do network discovery and find other DHCP servers that are Microsoft-based that are out there, that are inside your environment with automatic discovery, using group policy, using dynamic IP address and stuff like that. We have the ability to do multi-server management. I love this part. We can't show it to you today, but when it's all set up and running and good, you can actually go in and start to say, you know what, we have a problem with one of our DNS servers because it's got a poison cache or something like that, or I need to change the IP address in DNS for this particular server. I don't know where it is registered inside DNS. You can do search and replace in a field form and then search against your systems, and it will only edit and update the entries that are incorrect if you wanted to. It's phenomenal stuff you can do with that for centralized management configuration. And then finally, the auditing and tracking capabilities as well, with real-time capabilities that's there. How this all works, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw something out there around that auditing capability. Just be aware that the auditing capability will actually, by interrogating the security logs on domain controllers, will actually give you information about usernames that have logged onto the network and the IP address of the machine they've actually logged onto the network from. And that could present some potential privacy issues or something like that, so something to be aware of.
But it's for the auditors. You can lock down who can actually query it and do it, and
Absolutely.
they're supposed to be doing that for their job, right?
And how do I do that, Rick?
Well, let me take a look at the architecture of how this works. Nice segue. 2012 IPAM components and interactions. So basically, you have Inbox, the 2012 IPAM server. It's simply a function or a feature that you go off and you install on a 2012 box that's there. It's going to be using the WID database. The WID database stands for the Windows Internal Database. In the version of 2012 we're talking about right here, it's simply a relational data store local in the box. You then have individual IPAM client administration tools, known as RSAT, that you're going to be going off and using, or on a Windows Server 2012. You do not have to log on to the box to be able to do this. You then are going to go through with an agentless architecture and go and find and query and look for DHCP servers and DNS servers, and also the ability to go off and find domain controllers and also NPS, or network policy health servers as well. Those are all simply a matter of querying, what are the authorized DHCP servers in my domain? It's inside my Active Directory. Where are my DNS servers, because Active Directory relies on DNS? Where are my domain controllers, and other things along those lines to be able to do it? It then is going to go in and give you the ability to have different delegated level of control by simply having global groups on the local box to be able to, local groups on the box, to be able to control who is able to administer what. you can delegate out. These people can only do address stuff. These people can only do auditing stuff. These people can only do registrations and that sort of stuff. So that's very handy to have. You then have the ability to go through and basically segment and have multiple IPAM servers controlling multiple things, because you may not have the rights to manage the DHCP servers that are in India versus the ones that are in the States, as an example. That's all there and all built in box to be able to do a bunch of stuff. And I mentioned that external system. You can do imports and exports based on CSVs and then use PowerShell to get the data out of the Linux boxes, the non-Microsoft boxes, the other spreadsheets you happen to have running, and then match up the fields to be able to go to the proper way. With that,
Cool.
Mr. Macca.
Thank you. All right, now I gather that no one wanted to see me run the add roles wizard again, so thankfully I went and installed IPAM ahead of time, but it was really as hard as going manage, add, remove, etc., etc. You can see that once IPAM is installed on the machine, we get an IPAM node here inside Server Manager, and there are a whole bunch of things we need to go through in order to start getting things into this particular database. Now, in Rick's slide before, you'll notice that we have the agentless architecture, which is great, and we all cheer and yell and scream because we don't need to go and dump anything down on any other machines. But in order for us to support an agentless architecture, we're going to be hitting the boxes that we're querying for things like DNS, DHCP, security data in domain controllers, and also in network policy servers with a bunch of protocols. So we'll be hitting some things with LDAP, some things with MS Event 6, some things with WMI, etc., etc. And in order to do this, we need to start changing some firewall rules on those individual servers. Now, when we set up IPAM, the firewall rules we need to set up can be a little bit complex, so we've got an automated way of doing this for you. Basically, what we'll do through IPAM is we will bring in the server, we'll provision it and choose whether or not to provide these firewall rules down to these servers via group policy or manually, and then once we've chosen our option, we will, if we're going group policy, use a PowerShell script to actually create the group policy objects inside group policy. What we'll then do is we'll wait for the servers to pick them all up, we'll go and discover the servers through an automated task inside IPAM, and then we'll apply those group policy objects to those servers so we open up the firewall ports and can actually start interrogating the appropriate information that we need.
So that very long sequence that he just told you about is one way of us telling you that this is an artificially accelerated time frame we're doing right now. It has a replication latency, group policy convergence issues, and everything else like that. So don't expect to be able to go back to your complex multi-segmented environment, put this in place, do the group policy thing, and then magically have it start to work in the next half an hour. It can literally take many, many hours to days to be able to get up and going and discover stuff correctly. And you can't go further down that path until it's correctly discovered and able to input the data.
Absolutely right. Now, this is one of those times where you should actually bother to read before you begin section.
Yeah, do not just do click, 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 next, 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 install with IPAM.
Yes.
You will have to uninstall it and start again.
That's right, because once you've made your choice here, whether we're automatically configuring everybody's firewalls with GPOs or whether we're doing them manually, you are stuck with it. Having said that, hands up if you're paid by the hour. Right, going manual. If you're not being paid by the hour, you're going GPO. So what I'll do now is I'll simply hit next, choose the group policy-based method, and now provide a GPO name prefix that I'm going to use. So when it goes and creates the GPO objects for me, it'll put this prefix in front of them when I open them up inside Group Policy Management.
Word of advice, use a simple name that you're going to understand and not be ashamed of having inside your Active Directory, because you can't change it once you make it.
So IPAM 1 is fairly good, Frog is not so good.
Right.
So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead, apply that, and that part of the process is done. And that part of the process
is
done.
There we go.
This is the IPAM server. All we're doing is we're setting the IPAM server up, getting ready to then go out to other machines that it's found in the environment and start pulling their data back. Okay, so everything we've done right now is centered on the IPAM server. We haven't hit a DNS server, we haven't hit a DHCP server, we haven't done anything to anybody yet. We're purely setting up IPAM.
As I also mentioned though, he could be doing this all from his Windows client, targeting that server remotely using the RSAT tools. He doesn't have to physically be on that box to do this.
That's right. The next thing we need to do is decide exactly what domain or what forest we're targeting for this IPAM server.
You might not have rights, again, to manage the DHCP systems and other domains that you're not administrator of.
So what we'll do now is we'll simply choose what it is that we're after. So we've only got one domain here, obviously, so I'll add that in. And then in here, we then make a further distinction as to what resources in this domain we actually want to interrogate for the purpose of bringing information back into IPAM. By default, it will look at domain controllers, it will look at DHCP servers, it will look at DNS servers. And you'll notice that, sorry, I should have kept that open there. You'll notice that by default, we will create some scheduled tasks that will go off and look for servers in our environment. So query DHCP, query DNS, query the domain controllers to find out what's running what. And you can see at this point, we're not going to run this until 4:59 a.m. So hopefully, just sit down, relax. We'll be here for a little while, but that's okay. We can have a party here instead of at the... no? All right, I'll move on. Okay.
We have 3 bottles of water and some Coke outside, and that's it.
It's going off, as they say in Australia. Now, I'm going to start a server discovery. So this is how we can manually force this discovery process to occur. So I'm just going to hit server discovery, and we're going to find all of the machines out there that are either running DNS, DHCP, a domain controller, or network policy server, and I can guarantee you I don't have any. When I find these servers, I'm not actually going to do anything to them at this point, because there's one critical thing I haven't done yet. I haven't gone and provisioned the group policy objects to actually open up their firewall ports for the IPAM server to go and interrogate them yet. So if we just open up our, where am I? We'll just open up our PowerShell window here. You can see we've got a PowerShell script that we can execute to actually get that work done inside group policy, because right now none of these group policy objects have been created. You can see here we run an invoke IPAM GPO provisioning command. We tell it the name of the domain that we're putting these GPOs into, the prefix name that we're creating for them.
It pre-created and made that for us. We have to make sure we type it in exactly, otherwise it will not work.
Absolutely. The user that is delegated to create these, and then the FQDN of the IPAM server. So we'll hit that, and we'll allow that to occur. And it's saying now that it's going to create and link the 3 GPO objects. I know that's really easy to see from everywhere in the world. Probably those people watching online can see that.
What? People are watching us online?
Apparently so.
Not for 24 to 48 hours.
Oh. Right, and we're done.
Now, an interesting thing, again, is because he went off and discovered what these machine target names are, now the GPOs are actually created. Part of that process is also now going to go in and lock down those GPOs to only be applied to the computer accounts of those machines to make sure you don't screw up other GPOs that are out there. So this is, again, why this is, we're taking you through one of the gnarliest installs of 2012 of stuff, which is the IPAM installation process, and we're trying to simplify it as much as possible. There's great documentation about how to go through this. Make sure you read it.
In fact, one of the things that I really recommend you do, there is a step-by-step guide for setting this up in a lab environment that takes you through everything you need to do, and it's really good. It works every time. It's brilliant. It's a great way to actually get to know this technology rather than just sitting at a hands-on lab and having a go. So if you've got yourself a test environment, please, give this a shot and have a look at it. Now you can see now we have our 3 objects here. That's all great. And we're just waiting for server discovery to finish. And we can find out how that's going by opening up the task details here. Now this usually takes around about 2 minutes to complete. And then we'll have some data to look at, some servers that we've discovered.
Yep.
One of the things we probably also want to do at this point is run a GP update on our machines. So I'll just go to one of our machines here that's running a domain controller.
Now we're also playing with fire here because if you remember from our earlier sessions on Active Directory, you've got about 3 or 4 different domain controllers. This server that he's running GP update against could be talking to any one of those 3 or 4 domain controllers, which may or may not have finished converging their group policy across all 3 or 4 domain controllers. So I'm just basically kind of setting them up just in case he needs a soft landing, because it doesn't apply on the first time. Okay. This is accelerated time frame once again. You don't normally try to do this in 60 minutes.
Now, the server discovery is completed. I assume you saw that. Now, what we're going to do is just jump across here and see who we found. In fact, we found loads of stuff. At the moment, deliberately, we can't actually...
I'm so happy that it's there.
No, because he had faith in me, right?
Oh, I had total faith in you.
Yeah, you can tell, can't you? Now, deliberately, we can't do anything with them right now because in their natural state, when we first discover them, they are in an unmanaged type environment, which means we're not actually getting any information from them. What we need to do is go into the IPAM properties for each server we want to manage and change them from an unmanaged mode to a managed mode. What that then does is applies the group policy ACL to that particular server. And we then need to go back and do the GP update /force for that to come through. Now, what I'll do is I'll just highlight a number of these servers here and choose Edit Server. And you can see here that it's already discovered what type of server it is, and we now need to play around with the manageability status. The manageability status needs to go from unspecified to managed, and that effectively goes back to the group policy and changes it. Now you'll notice that when I set it to managed, it's telling me straight away, hang on, I can't do anything. The group policy object isn't down there yet, so you need to make sure that you go ahead and do a GP update, or we'll wait for a while. GP update will happen as a natural consequence of reality, and once that's done, the policy is applied, the firewall port's open, and then we'll see an unblocked status there. So I might also do that for, let's say, DC4, and it may be DC2, because I could have just done a shift click, but why would I do that? And I'll grab one or two of the DHCP servers as well. I won't bother with DC4. That's great. Now that I've done that, I simply need to go back to my DC, hit a GP update. Might do it for a DHCP server as well, just so you can see them both. And I'll do it for the second DHCP server also. Don't worry, you've seen GP update /force before, I'm sure. All right. Okay, coming back into the IPAM server now. What we should be able to do in just a moment is retrieve the data from the managed servers. So once the GP has been applied and the firewall ports are open, we're now waiting for another scheduled task, a data collection task, to kick off on IPAM to connect to all of those servers that it has the rights to connect to and grab their information. That should have been enough time for the GP update to work, so we'll hit retrieve data, and now we'll wait again. You can see now that when we hit the retrieve data task, it goes out and pulls back a whole bunch of different scheduled tasks. And if we just go and examine those ones, we can see, for instance, we're querying DHCP servers for addresses that have expired. We're querying the servers for their configuration, so we can see information about their scopes and about their zones, etc., etc. We're pulling a monitoring task here to see the overall health of the individual servers in the environment. We're running the auditing task to pull back any security information from the event logs, etc., etc. Now, that should almost have finished. We're just waiting for the final two to complete. And then we'll very quickly go and have a look and see if any data has actually bubbled through. Almost there. We'll take a chance and see if anything's there already. There you go. So straight away you can see the information about our IP address blocks have come through. So we're getting data already.
I was just going to say that once you start to collect this data, this is when you basically get to what I call humanize this data, because currently it's static and just pulling information by the name of the scope and the addresses in use and current capacity, that sort of stuff. But you need to put in your own personal business translation. What scope does this guy actually reference? Is this the finance scope? Is this building number 27? Does this belong to Frankfurt as far as the city is concerned? You need to put that into it because only you have that intelligence to be able to associate correctly what it is and make it more useful. The reason why you personalize it more is because you will have the ability, as you saw with Macca's demo there, using a form to be able to choose what you want to do with stuff. Now when you're assigning addresses and assigning reservations, you use the tool itself to do your address management from this point forward. You can still use the traditional DHCP admin tool to be able to make a static reservation, but it's much more cohesive if you do it instead using the IPAM tool because it kicks off a set of workflow as you go along. And you can securely delegate out the rights to be able to do that without having to give them DHCP administrator rights on those remote boxes because it's the IPAM server that does the work. So quite literally, picture this scenario of being able to say, I need to deploy that new HP printer that is an IP address-based printer, a network-connected printer, that's going to be taking place in Building 23 and servicing the finance department. I want to have it use an available address range. I don't know what address I want to assign it. Go and find me one from the range that's designated for printers, and then see if it's available and in use. If it's not in use, go ahead and assign it for me and check it out for me for the reservation. Go ahead and make that reservation, and then go, done. It's finished. And then the cool thing is you can set expiry dates on those reservations, and you'll get warnings saying, hey, you've got less than 2 weeks before this address expires. Do you want to go off and extend it? This is mind-blowing for IP address management as an inbox solution. but it requires human personalization and some investment in time that might slow down the regular way you're used to working.
Yeah, absolutely.
But definitely opens up the possibilities for a lot more smoother and auditable ways of managing IP addresses.
And a lot of the commercial solutions for this can be really, really expensive really quickly. Now,
Yep.
what you can just see here on the screen is an example of what we can do here to create scope objects and so on and so forth and have them flow down. But that's pretty much what I've got for you because we are pretty much done. But I just wanted to show you the process you had to go through to get IPAM in place, because we want to have everybody's eyes wide open. There's a few steps, but as you can see, it works, and it works pretty well.
Yep, it's just a little sticky to get through the very first time around.
That one?
Yep. Now, the last part we want to talk about that we mentioned, at least in the very beginning of this, was the whole concept. I already did implement an IPAM. There we go. I'm not hitting the right button. That's the button I'm looking for. There we go. It's the concept of migrating WSUS. So if you happen to be using WSUS inside your environment, it is something that potentially is running on the older version of 2008 R2. WSUS is now built in. It's built in 2012. And the main reason why I look at migrating WSUS is the fact that you're now going to be able to leverage some of the lower level architecture changes in 2012, like storage spaces, to be able to have dynamically expanding drives to be able to accommodate all those patches that are out there, like NIC teaming to get better resiliency in case you need to be able to go off and offer up patches to different people. So from a migration perspective, there is documentation about how this is going to take place. It is available on the site that we gave you earlier for looking for Windows Server 2012 migration resources, and it is an easy enough process to follow through. The difficult part is the SQL chunks of work that have to be done, because you're basically going to be running a bunch of SQL queries, a bunch of GUID generations, and a bunch of matching and tables and stuff like that. That is all documented inside the SUS migration tool document. There is no automated tool to do this. It's file copies, it's replication of databases, it's running those SQL queries to line them back up again to make it all work. What's the advantage of doing a WSUS migration? The advantages?
The advantage is basically you can take advantage of all of the other aspects of the new operating system that are in place. Yep. At the end of the day, the version of WSUS that you're using between the two environments, whether they be 2008 R2 and Server 2012, is exactly the same.
Yep.
And indeed, nothing much has really changed about WSUS for quite a while, as you can see by the picture.
We tried our best to find the most current picture. I will mention, though, if you do the migration and go through the little bit of pain to go through it all, you do get to keep all of your computer-defined groups that you might have already set up. You get to keep all the prior authorizations and approvals of different patches. You do get to keep all those different previous must be installed by dates and timestamps. That's all sort of there. So there is definite value for why you should inquire and look at migrating that WSUS server over to 2012. With that in mind, we got about 2 to 3 minutes that's left. My standard spiel that I have is basically thank you very much for coming and spending time with us. We would very much appreciate if you would take the time to please fill out your evaluations. Please give us some good scores, because hopefully you're finding this session informational and that you're also entertained as well. But also, this also tells the organizers this is the type of information you'd like to see at TechEd going forward, talking about current stuff and how to use it better, as well as all the new stuff and how it's going to work for you. So with that, we're going to be sticking around for the next and last session after this. We got a half-an-hour break. If you have any additional questions, come on down, and we'll be talking to you. Thank you very much for sticking around with us.
Guys. Right, what do I need next?